What if I told you that the most dangerous weapon you could ever carry is not a sword, not an army, not even wealth, but discipline? Not the kind of discipline you hear about in motivational speeches, but a darker, sharper force. A discipline forged in secrecy, sharpened by cunning, and guided by one man's ruthless mind. This man was Niccolò Machiavelli. His name has become a synonym for manipulation, betrayal, and ruthless power. But behind the myths, behind the caricature of a schemer with no morals, lies something most people never see. Machiavelli's greatest secret was not just how to manipulate others, it was how to master himself. And that mastery, if you dare to embrace it, can make you dangerously disciplined. Niccolò Machiavelli lived during one of the most brutal times in history. Florence was a city of constant betrayal. Wars broke out, alliances collapsed overnight, and noble families clawed for dominance. In this chaos, Machiavelli was not a soldier, nor a king. He was a thinker, a strategist, a man who looked at the storms of power and asked, what keeps a person from being crushed? His answer was discipline, not the gentle kind, but the ruthless kind that bends even chaos to your will. When people hear Machiavelli's name, they imagine a villain plotting in the shadows. They think of his book, The Prince, where he told rulers it was better to be feared than loved. But what most forget is that Machiavelli was not writing from a throne. He was writing from desperation, even exile, after he had lost his own position of power. He had been tortured, imprisoned, humiliated. Most men would have broken, but Machiavelli did not. He rebuilt himself through his discipline, and from that place he revealed truths about human nature that still unsettle us today. He saw what others could not bear to admit, that people are selfish, that loyalty fades, that kindness without strength invites betrayal. He believed the only way to survive in a world like his was to discipline yourself so deeply that nothing, not pain, not temptation, not fear, could break your will. And it worked. Though he was cast aside by his city, his writings outlived every prince he advised. His words shaped kings, emperors, and even modern leaders centuries later. That is the legacy of a dangerously disciplined mind. And yet here is the secret most people miss. Machiavelli was not only ruthless, he was precise. He understood that discipline was not about controlling others first, but about controlling yourself. The fox and the lion. Two symbols he used were not just about politics. They were about life. To be like the fox is to discipline your mind to be clever, watchful, never deceived. To be like the lion is to discipline your will, to strike with force when the moment demands it. Together they create a balance that makes you untouchable. So why should you keep watching? Because in this video you are going to uncover the hidden layers of Machiavelli's philosophy that almost no one talks about. Not the cliches, not the overrode quotes, but the methods that can turn discipline into a weapon. You will see how he trained himself to endure pain, how he built secret rules that guided him, and how he transformed weakness into strength. These are not lessons for the faint of heart. They are lessons for those who dare to master themselves when everyone else is lost. By the end, you will understand how Machiavelli's dark secret can apply not just to rulers and politics, but to your own daily battles. Whether you are fighting laziness, fear, or the endless distractions of the modern world, his teachings cut through the noise. They give you a framework to be sharper, colder when needed, and unstoppable in your focus. Discipline, as Machiavelli understood it, is not just about routines. It is about becoming so controlled, so precise, that others cannot predict or manipulate you. That is what it means to be dangerously disciplined. So welcome to Psych Algorithm. If you are ready to step into the mind of Machiavelli and discover the dark discipline that few dare to practice, stay with me until the very end. And before we dive deeper into this hidden knowledge, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the secrets that others are too afraid to tell you. Because today, you are not just learning history. You are learning how to sharpen yourself into a force that no one can easily break. Before we talk about the secret of dangerous discipline, we need to look at the way Machiavelli saw human nature. Because for him, everything begins with people. If you misunderstand people, you misunderstand power. And Machiavelli was not blinded by illusions. He didn't believe in the perfect goodness of men, nor did he trust in loyalty that lasts forever. He looked at the world with sharp, almost cruel eyes. And what he saw was this: people are selfish, people are weak, and people are changeable. To Machiavelli, human beings are guided less by noble ideals and more by hunger, fear, and desire. A friend can betray you the moment their interest shifts. A promise made in daylight can vanish in the darkness of opportunity. Loyalty, he believed, was often just a mask worn until the deal appeared. And this wasn't just an opinion. He watched it happen again and again in Florence, where allies turned into enemies overnight, and supposed protectors became destroyers when the balance of power shifted. But instead of despairing, Machiavelli drew a lesson. If people are unstable, if their emotions change like the weather, then you cannot rely on them to remain steady. What you can rely on is yourself. And that means one thing: inner discipline. When everyone else bends with the wind, you must be the stone that doesn't move. When others chase comfort or pleasure, you must train yourself to act with precision, regardless of your mood. Machiavelli's dark brilliance was in understanding that discipline is not just a personal virtue. It is a weapon against the chaos of human behavior. He saw that rulers who depended on the loyalty of others were destined to be betrayed, but rulers who mastered themselves, who could endure hardship, resist temptation, and act without hesitation, were almost impossible to defeat. The same lesson applies to you. In a world where people are easily distracted, easily discouraged, and easily bought, your ability to control yourself becomes the most dangerous advantage of all. Think about it. Most people act only when they feel like it. They work when they are motivated. They quit when it gets hard. They change course when discomfort arrives. Machiavelli would call this wheat. He would say such people are like reeds swaying in the wind, bending whichever way circumstances push them. And he would warn, if you are like them, you will always be ruled by someone who is stronger. That is why he urged the cultivation of discipline so strong that it stands when emotions collapse. For Machiavelli, unpredictability in others was not a curse. It was an opportunity. When everyone else hesitates, the disciplined person steps forward. When others are paralyzed by fear, the disciplined person stalls with clarity. When the crowd runs one way, the disciplined person chooses his own path. This is how leaders rise. Not because they are always loved, but because they move with a steadiness that others lack. And steadiness in a storm looks like strength. One striking example from Machiavelli's time was how leaders survived betrayal. He observed that the ones who could not control their anger, their fear, or their greed fell the fastest. They made rash decisions. They trusted the wrong people. They lost their grip. But the leaders who could master themselves even when surrounded by enemies often turned the tables. Their discipline created space to think when everyone else was blinded by emotion. And in that space they found advantage. Machiavelli even went further. He believed that because people are selfish, the disciplined person must learn to use that selfishness. If you know that men will always serve their own interest, you can predict them, guide them, and even trap them. But you can only do this if you are not a prisoner of your own impulses. If you are as changeable as they are, you cannot lead them. Discipline is the line that separates the manipulator from the manipulator. He often wrote about how fortune, or chance, plays a role in life. To him, fortune was like a violent river, flooding and destroying everything in its path. Most people are swept away. But the disciplined man builds dams and channels, preparing in advance, so when fortune rages, he is not destroyed. And here again we see the same foundation. People are unpredictable. The world is unstable. So only through control of self can you carve stability out of chaos. This is why Machiavelli's view of human nature is so unsettling. It strips away illusions. It tells you that most people are not reliable. Not because they are evil, but because they are weak. They are driven by comfort and fear. And in such a world, the one who holds discipline in his hand holds power. He does not wait for motivation. He does not wait for trust. He does not wait for the approval of others. He acts. And because he acts when others hesitate, he takes what they leave behind. Machiavelli's insight is not a flattering one. It does not paint a noble picture of humanity, but it gives you a map of reality. If people are selfish, weak, and changeable, then the strongest shield you can build is the shield of inner discipline, because when you are firm inside yourself, the chaos of others becomes the very ground you stand on, and their hesitation becomes your opening. Machiavelli used a word that still confuses many readers today: virtù. At first glance, it seems to be the Italian version of virtue, but it is not about kindness, morality, or goodness. Machiavelli's virtù was a darker, sharper quality. It meant strength, boldness, the ability to shape events rather than be shaped by them. It was the opposite of weakness, the opposite of passivity. To possess virtù was to be prepared, decisive, and ruthless when necessary. And at the heart of this quality was discipline. Machiavelli lived in a time when fortune was violent and unstable. Armies invaded, plagues struck, and rulers fell overnight. He saw fortune as a raging river that could not always be controlled, but that could be resisted by those who had the strength to prepare. Virtù was the discipline that allowed a person to resist fortune, to channel chaos, to endure setbacks without being broken. It demanded that you do not waste time in laziness or distraction, but sharpen your mind and body for the moment when opportunity arrives. The man of virtù acts swiftly when the chance comes, while others hesitate. He described virtù as the quality that separates a ruler who merely inherits power from a ruler who creates power. It is not luck that raises such a man. It is his ability to discipline his own weaknesses, to endure hardship, and to act with audacity. To Machiavelli, discipline was not a routine of daily tasks. It was a way of living in constant readiness. You train yourself to withstand pain, to think when others panic, to decide when others delay. This is the seed of dangerous discipline, the kind that makes you capable of changing your fate, rather than being its victim. And within the idea of virtù lies one of Machiavelli's most famous metaphors: the fox and the lion. He wrote that every ruler must learn to be both. The lion represents force, strength, the power to intimidate and protect. But a lion alone cannot survive, because traps are laid for him, and he cannot see them. That is why the ruler must also be the fox, who is cunning, watchful, able to detect snares before stepping into them. To be only a lion is to fall into the traps of the clever. To be only a fox is to be devoured by the strong. Only the combination survive. When you think about this in terms of discipline, the lesson becomes even clearer. Discipline is not just about brute force, waking early, grinding endlessly, pushing yourself without rest. That is the lion's way. But discipline must also be subtle and clever. Like the fox, you must control your impulses, observe quietly, and know when to strike and when to wait. Discipline means knowing when to roar, and when to remain silent. It means having the control to hold back your strength until the exact moment it is needed. Machiavelli's fox and lion duality is a warning against one-dimensional discipline. Some people believe that to be disciplined is only to be rigid, strict, and fierce. They push themselves with the lion's energy but lack the fox's subtlety. They burn out or they reveal their strength too openly, and enemies prepare against them. Others rely only on cunning, on fox-like calculation, But without the lion's ferocity, their plans collapse when tested by raw power. Machiavelli teaches that true discipline is balance, flexible, cunning, yet unafraid of force. It is the rare individual who can embody both. From here, Machiavelli takes the lesson further. He tells us that power, by its nature, cannot always be displayed openly. A disciplined person must sometimes hide their true intentions. He explains that rulers often need to deceive, not because they are evil by nature, but because the world is filled with those who would sabotage them if they spoke plainly. A man who reveals every thought, every plan, every weakness, is easily destroyed, but a man who conceals his designs until the right moment is protected. Discipline, then, is not only about doing what you say you will do, it is about knowing when not to say what you are doing. It is about silence, secrecy, and patience. The undisciplined mind wants to boast, to share plans, to seek applause. The disciplined mind waits, it moves quietly, and then suddenly, when the time is right, it acts. In this way, deception becomes a tool of discipline, not reckless lying, but strategic concealment. Just as a hunter does not reveal himself to his prey until the arrow is drawn, a disciplined person does not reveal his hand until victory is certain. Machiavelli also speaks of fear and love, and here his reputation for darkness is clearest. He is remembered for the claim that it is better to be feared than loved. But this is often misunderstood. What he truly said is that it is best to be both loved and feared. But if you must choose, fear is safer, because love depends on others, and others are changeable, selfish, and weak. Fear, however, creates boundaries that are not so easily broken. Translated into personal discipline, this means something striking: to rely only on motivation, kindness to yourself, or the approval of others is fragile. There will be days when motivation fails. There will be times when kindness tempts you into weakness. Discipline cannot rest only on love. It must also have an edge of fear. Not fear of others, but fear of betraying your own standards. You create boundaries within yourself that you do not cross, no matter the temptation. If kindness fails, firmness steps in. If desire pulls you away, fear of weakness drags you back to the path. This is the dark side of discipline. To build within yourself a ruler that you fear to disappoint. Machiavelli was brutally honest about this. He warned that without fear, love turns soft. A leader who relies only on love is destroyed when his followers abandon him. A person who relies only on kindness to himself collapses when pleasure calls. But a person who has cultivated both, kindness when possible, firmness when necessary, becomes unshakable. This dual approach is as essential as the fox and the lion. It is balance, soft when softness is enough, iron when softness breaks. But Machiavelli's vision of discipline did not stop at human relationships. He also taught about crisis, about resistance, about the storms that fortune always brings. In his writings, he warned that times change, and those who fail to adapt are destroyed. The disciplined person is not rigid in the wrong way. He does not cling to outdated habits when the world shifts. Instead, he adapts swiftly, but without losing his core strength. This is perhaps the hardest discipline of all, to change when needed, without losing your essence. Machiavelli compared fortune to a violent woman who must be dominated with boldness. The metaphor is harsh, but his meaning was clear. Fortune respects the prepared and the daring. To him, those who suffer most in crisis are the ones who relied on comfort, who never trained themselves to endure pain, who thought fortune would always be gentle. But those who trimmed away excess, who hardened themselves against hardship, who practiced self-denial in peace, so they could endure in war. These were the ones who survived. Discipline, in crisis, means cutting away what is unnecessary. It means learning to do with less, to sharpen your will by facing discomfort instead of running from it. In Machiavelli's world, rulers who fat with luxury collapsed at the first sign of trouble. But rulers who kept themselves lean, who trained their minds to act under pressure, often came out stronger after the storm. For ordinary life, the lesson is the same. If you avoid hardship, you remain weak. If you embrace it, you become resilient. Adversity becomes your training ground. Machiavelli's writings may seem cold, even ruthless, but their power lies in this unflinching view of reality. He did not write for those who wanted comforting illusions. He wrote for those who wanted to survive and to dominate in a world where weakness is punished. His lessons about virtue, about the fox and the lion, about concealment, fear and crisis, are not bound to politics alone. They are lessons about the human condition, and about the kind of discipline that can turn an ordinary person into someone formidable. Virtue is not kindness. It is not morality. It is the art of mastering yourself so completely that you can face fortune, deception, betrayal, and resistance without falling apart. It is the fusion of boldness and patience, of cunning and strength, of love and fear, of rigidity and adaptability, and at every level it is built on discipline. The kind of discipline that most people cannot imagine, because it does not just keep you steady, it makes you dangerous. Machiavelli often drew a sharp line between what is seen in public and what remains hidden in private. He understood that appearances rule the world. People judge you by what they can see, but what truly guides your destiny is what you do in silence. Public action may win applause, but private discipline decides whether you endure. This is where his most dangerous idea of discipline emerges, the creation of a private code, an inner law. It is the rule book that belongs only to you, unseen by others, unbroken even under pressure. Most people live according to rules handed to them by society. They act the way their friends act. They follow the rhythms of their families, their workplaces, their cultures. Machiavelli believed such people are ick because they are predictable. They can be read, manipulated, and controlled. But the one who writes his own secret code stands apart. He is guided not by external approval, but by inner command. And because no one else knows his exact standards, no one else can easily anticipate his actions. This is the heart of dangerous discipline, not just the will to act, but the clarity of acting from a code that others cannot see. This inner law is not written in public declarations. It is forged quietly, in the choices you make when no one is watching. For Machiavelli, the disciplined leader was the one who had such a private compass that even if the crowd shifted, even if fortune turned, he did not lose his way. In his writings, he spoke of rulers who smiled in public while calculating in private, men who gave the appearance of mercy while preparing for decisive strikes. He admired the ability to separate the mask from the mind, to give people the show they wanted while secretly following one's own strategy. Imagine a general preparing for war. His speeches to his soldiers are filled with hope and inspiration. But his private notes reveal something else. Strict rules about how many hours to drill, when to ration food, when advance, when to retreat. The soldiers hear his promises of glory, but only he knows the precise boundaries he will not cross. This gap between the outer performance and the inner code is what Machiavelli respected. And it is this gap that makes discipline dangerous, because when others assume you are just like them, following the same rules, you are in fact guided by a private system they cannot break. Machiavelli himself lived by such discipline during his years of political service. One of the clearest examples is his reform of the Florentine citizen army. For decades, Florence had relied on mercenaries, soldiers for hire. They were expensive, untrustworthy, and often deserted in the heat of battle. Machiavelli saw their weakness and decided that a republic should not depend on men who had no loyalty. His solution was radical: build an army of ordinary citizens trained under strict discipline. This was not popular at first. The wealthy elite feared arming common people, and the common people themselves doubted their own ability. But Machiavelli's private conviction did not waver. He drilled the citizens relentlessly, instilled order where there had been none, and demanded a new kind of dedication. In public, it looked like mere reform. In reality, it was his private law at work. Never trust what you cannot control. Mercenaries could never be controlled, but citizens bound by discipline could. His reforms strengthened Florence for years, proving that his hidden rules had real effects on the survival of states. Look at history through Machiavelli's eyes and you see the same pattern. Rulers who survived hostile times always had private codes. Caesar was charming in public, but in private he kept a ruthless record debts and favored. Napoleon dazzled his soldiers with speeches of destiny, but in his tent he worked late into the night, enforcing strict timetables and notes of logistics that no one else saw. Even modern leaders who appear spontaneous often operate by private routines of self-control and secrecy. Their enemies underestimate them because they confuse the mask for the man. But it is the inner law that sustains their power. Discipline for Machiavelli was never meant to be shown off. The moment you parade your rules for the world to see, you give away your strength. A private code works because it is hidden. It allows you to bend in public, to adapt, to smile, to appear flexible, while inside you remain fixed. Others may think you are swayed by their words, but in truth, you are anchored to a system that cannot be moved. This is why he called it a secret. It is not secrecy for the sake of deception. It is secrecy for the sake of survival. But here lies the danger. A code so private, a discipline so inward, can easily twist into cruelty. Machiavelli never denied this. He admitted that his ideas were controversial, even disturbing. A doer who follows only his private standard risks becoming rigid, manipulative, even tyrannical. If the inner law is built only on selfishness, it produces monsters. Discipline without any balance turns cold, shutting out empathy, suffocating others. It is why his writings are both admired and hated. They expose the razor's edge. Discipline can make you strong, but it can also make you merciless. Think of the leaders who failed because their inner codes hardened into cages. Some became so rigid that they could not adapt when times changed. Others became cruel, punishing everyone who resisted their control, until rebellion destroyed them. Machiavelli warns against this trap. Discipline must not mean blindness. It must not mean pride that refuses to bend when bending is wise. He praised adaptability, the ability to alter tactics while still staying loyal to one's core law. Without this balance, discipline collapses into tyranny, whether of a nation or of the self. And this is where empathy enters the picture. Machiavelli's readers often miss this subtlety, but he did not always advocate cruelty. He valued mercy when it was strategic. He admired rulers who could show generosity at the right time, because it bound people to them. The key was not to abandon discipline, but to use empathy as part of it, to know when to be firm and when to be kind. Dangerous discipline is not the absence of feeling. It is the control of feeling, the ability to use it without being used by it. For the individual, the lesson is clear. If you build a private code, it must be strong, but it must also be intelligent. It must guide you firmly, but not trap you in arrogance. Your dark secret is not just that you have rules. It is that you know when to enforce them and when to adapt. It is that you act according to your standards even when no one is watching, but you are wise enough not to wield discipline as a weapon against yourself or others in blind cruelty. Machiavelli challenges us to take this seriously, to look at our own lives and ask, do we truly have an inner law, or are we just drifting with the rules of others? To be dangerously disciplined means daring to create such a law, and daring to keep it hidden. It means practicing secrecy where others overshare, firmness where others falter, and empathy where others lose balance. It means acting not for applause, but for endurance. So take this lesson and test it. For 7 days, live by one private rule that no one else knows. It could be as simple as rising at a certain hour, refusing a certain weakness, or pushing yourself past a familiar limit. Do not announce it. Do not explain it. Let it be your secret. At the end of the week, you will feel the difference. The quiet strength of discipline that belongs only to you. That is the Machiavellian way. Not just discipline, but dangerous discipline. The kind that builds power in silence. The kind that others cannot see. The kind that makes you untouchable when storms arrive. The question remains then, will you be like the many, disciplined only when others are watching, ruled by outer approval? Or will you write your own hidden code, carry it silently, and live by it no matter what the world says? The choice is yours, and the answer may decide not just how you act, but how far you rise. Discipline is not just waking up early, or sticking to a routine. That is surface level. The real dangerous kind of discipline is something deeper. It is the art of blending ruthlessness with subtlety. It is knowing when to be firm as iron, and when to bend like water. It is control with flexibility, and it is power that hides behind calm eyes. This was Machiavelli's dark secret, discipline that turns a person into something others cannot easily predict, manipulate, or defeat. So I leave you with a question. If discipline could make you unstoppable, would you dare to embrace the darker edge of it? Think about it, not just today, but every time you choose between comfort and control. If you found this video eye-opening, like it now and subscribe to Psych Algorithm so you don't miss the next one. Your journey into hidden power has only just begun.